The 400 and 450cc motorcycle segment has a lot of options for you. And today we have these two, same but yet different. The Harley-Davidson X440 and the Hero Mavrick 440. Both based on the same engine, same chassis, yet they ride different, they feel different. And if you're in the market for a 400, 450cc motorcycle, and if you're considering these two, which one should you pick and why? That's the question we'll try to answer today. But before that, please do consider liking the Car and Bike channel. If you haven't yet, hit that bell icon so that you get notified every time we ride a new bike or talk about comparing two bikes in the same ballpark of engine displacement, power and price tag. So let's get down to it. Talk about the Hero Mavrick 440 and the Harley-Davidson X440. What we'll try to answer is which one of these will work for you, and if you're in the market for something in that segment, should you consider either of these two or should you consider something else? Now if you look at the design of both these bikes, they are like chalk and cheese. The X440, when it was launched, I was not a fan of its looks, but after the Mavrick was launched, I've started growing up to the X440. It looks unique, it looks different, it looks slightly desirable, and it is a Harley-Davidson after all. It has that Harley-Davidson branding, it has that unique neo-retro cruiser design, which is somewhat different than any other motorcycle in that segment. It's not a modern classic by any chance, and it's more modern than classic, more neo than retro. So to my mind, of course, it's the Harley-Davidson X440 between these two, which I will pick. But then again, design is subjective. You may warm up towards this, the Mavrick 440, which is more of a modern roadster design. And that's what it looks. But you tell me, which one do you prefer and why? To me, the Mavrick has got a slightly confused design. I haven't really warmed up to it. Design-wise, looks-wise, it is a mismatch of everything. The front, I'm still a fan of. The rear, I'm not a fan of. Front is acceptable to my mind, but I think the design is slightly overdone. And again, looks are subjective, but if you look at presence, this one looks bulkier, more muscular than the X440, but that's a plus point in this comparison at least. So if you like road presence, probably it's the Mavrick which will give you a bigger bike feel than the Harley-Davidson X440. And that's what these two bikes looks like. And you let us know which one is your pick design-wise and why. Let's take a look at the features. Now, the Mavrick comes with a full digital instrument console. It gets all your required readouts. The speed is quite legible, but when you're on the highway, the rest of the readouts, you really have to look hard, and not advisable when you're cruising at 80-90 kilometers per hour to squint and look at the RPM or the kilometers or what have you. So if it was slightly bigger, the display would have made it better. Speed you can read very clearly, but the rest of the readouts not that great on the Mavrick 440. The Harley-Davidson instrument console, on the other hand, looks premium. It starts up with that Harley-Davidson logo and everything is legible. It's color display. You get your speed, you get the gear position indicator, very legible rev counter also. So that instrument console feels premium, looks premium, and is very legible whether you're riding in the city, whether you're riding on the highway. So this one feels like a better put together bike. That is the riding position of the Harley-Davidson X440. You sit upright. It's not very feet forward like the traditional cruiser. Mid-set foot pegs, a quite comfortable place to be in. And this has a seat height of 805 mm. Comparatively, the Mavrick, although it looks like the taller, bigger bike, it actually has 2 mm less seat height. It has a typical roadster stance. Again, upright, not very sporty, but it has a slight lean to the handlebar compared to the Harley-Davidson X440. So yes, it is slightly sportier compared to the X440, but not really a sporty roadster, if you will. But there's also a difference in the weight of these two motorcycles. This one may look like the more muscular motorcycle than the X440, but it is actually 3 kilos lighter than the X440. It's got a curb weight of 187 kgs. Not very heavy, quite manageable to push around of parking lots. The Harley-Davidson X440 on the other hand has a curb weight of 190 kilograms, so roughly about 3 kilos more than the Mavrick 440. It's still not a very heavy bike. You can still push it around parking lots, and so easy to handle. Both bikes have the same engine and the same chassis, but there's some difference in the cycle parts. For example, the Harley-Davidson X440 gets 43mm upside down front forks and a bigger 18-inch front wheel, whereas the Mavrick 440 also gets 43mm forks, but these are telescopic forks, and it gets a 17-inch front wheel. Now, how do those make a difference in the ride quality? That's also something we'll talk about in a bit. And the weight, the change in torque, the wheel sizes, the suspension, how do those make a difference, if at all, between these two bikes? That's what we intend to find out, and there's only one way to do that, is ride both these bikes back to back and tell you about it, which one of these is a better bike overall in terms of performance, in terms of handling, in terms of overall ride experience. And at the end, we'll talk about, should you even consider one of these two motorcycles now in 2025? Motorcycle, you're primarily going to be using it in the city. You want a relaxed cruiser, torque-laden engine. The Mavrick 440 will not disappoint you. That long stroke engine has got dollops of torque. You don't need to change gears too much, pulls very cleanly. And for commuting, this bike is surprisingly impressive. Ride quality is plush, very comfortable. And for riding within the city, the Mavrick 440 really is quite an eye-opener in terms of the ride performance. And so all good things, is it? Not really. Once you hit the highway, the vibes start to creep in. Beyond 4,000 RPM, which will be when you'll hit about 9,500 kilometers per hour, is when you'll feel a lot of vibes on the handlebar, a lot of vibes on the foot peg. But 80 to 90 is the sweet spot of this bike. And the vibes are so much that you'll keep adjusting these mirrors, which is really irritating in this day and age, because the mirrors will go out of whack, and on the highway you constantly will need to keep adjusting those mirrors because of the vibes. So vibes, yes, but for city use, this offers good ride quality, torquey engine, smooth performance. So all those are good points. But again, the design is something which will take some warming up to. But as a motorcycle, ride quality, torquey engine, Mavrick 440 is a really impressive product. I wish Hero MotoCorp had worked on the design, made it more desirable, and this could have really made a mark for itself. But with the design, I don't think the Mavrick 440 will find so many takers. The problem with the Mavrick 440, to my mind, is it lacks desirability. No matter how good the engine is, how torquey, how smooth, how good the ride quality is, it just is not desirable enough for anyone to take a second glance or maybe even think of aspiring to own one. That is the biggest problem with the Mavrick 440. Otherwise, as a product, it's well engineered, rides well, engine feels good, as long as you're not in a tearing hurry to get anywhere. If you want performance, this bike is not the bike for you. If you want a chill, relaxed ride, the Mavrick 440 will not disappoint you. Now, in terms of performance, in the city, if you're riding, at say speeds of below 60-70 kilometers per hour, both bikes will offer similar performance to you. You can't make out much of a difference. In terms of engine performance, it's the X440 which somewhat feels slightly more urgent, and that's also because it's 3 kgs lighter. And towards the top end, it's the X440 which feels slightly slower than the Mavrick 440. Both bikes have the same engine, slightly different sound, not much of a difference, but this one is the bassier sounding motorcycle. Now in the city, when you're riding at 60, 70, 80 kilometers per hour, you won't be able to make out much of a difference in the performance. But what comes to mind is that the X440 somewhat feels more refined than the Mavrick 440. All those vibrations are lot less muted on the X440 that you encounter on the Mavrick 440. On the flip side though, at the top end, it's the Mavrick 440 which feels like it's got a better top end than the X440. How much better? Not too much of a difference. Speed indicator top speed, I could see over 140 kilometers on the Mavrick 440. On the X440, it lags by about 136, 137 kilometers per hour. And going from 100 to 130, the X440 doesn't feel as urgent as the Mavrick 440, which feels slightly more urgent than the X440. The difference is not so much, but it's a slight difference in the top end performance. And again, if you really want a performance-oriented motorcycle, neither of these two motorcycles are for you. Both these motorcycles are designed and made for relaxed cruising. If that's the kind of riding that you do, you will not be disappointed. But if you want acceleration, you want quick speeds, these bikes, both of them, you will get much better options in the market which will offer you far better performance than these two. And again, refinement, this is the better bike. Top end performance, the Mavrick 440 is the better bike. Now the Harley-Davidson X440, the most accessible Harley-Davidson, was launched in July 2023. The idea of this was to take some volumes from a segment which has largely been dominated by Royal Enfield, which is 350s. Of course, Royal Enfield sells about 80 to 90,000 motorcycles a month. So the premise of the Harley-Davidson X440 is to offer you, the consumer, a motorcycle with the Harley-Davidson nameplate, yet affordable and with a slightly bigger 440cc engine than the Royal Enfield 350s. Now, almost 2 years later, has it been able to make that mark in the market? And after that was launched the Hero Mavrick 440, also based on the same platform, but offering a slightly different personality or character, if you will. More a roadster-oriented version than a classic cruiser styling that the X440. But have these two motorcycles from Hero MotoCorp and Harley-Davidson India been able to create a mark, and should you even consider one of these two now? That's the question we'll try to answer. And of course, how are these bikes and will they still make sense today in 2025 if you're in the market for anything in the 350 to 450cc motorcycle segment and at that price bracket, about 2.5 lakh rupees ex-showroom. But as they say, timing is everything. Just 2 days after the X440 was launched in 2023, the Triumph Speed 400, the made in India Triumph Speed 400 was launched with just a slight price increase over that, and that gives you a better overall motorcycle in terms of desirability, in terms of performance, in terms of ride quality, and in terms of overall ownership and the feel-good factor. So that is one rival which you don't have, unfortunately, a test bike here, but that is something you should look at if you do consider the X440. Now, if you look at the Mavrick 440, you want a roadster style, slightly more modern looking motorcycle, and you're looking at this, I think you would also want slightly more performance, slightly more acceleration, slightly more top speed. Then the Bajaj Pulsar NS400Z is more affordable than this, and it is one of the best bang for buck motorcycles when it comes to performance roadsters in the country right now. That is one option that you should look at if you're considering this. But if you just want an answer, which one of these two should you pick? My choice will lean towards the Harley-Davidson X440. You let us know which one of these two will you choose, and if you're looking for a motorcycle in that price bracket, in that engine displacement, which are the choices that you will pick before choosing either of these two, or will you choose something else other than the Mavrick 440 or the X440? Let us know in the comments. If you ride a motorcycle, please do wear a helmet. Always wear a helmet. Ride safe. I will see you in the next one. Thank you.